welcome back to Bitchin Witch, my 1 day a week. Namaste, Witchlings. How are we doing tonight? Welcome back to Bitchin Witch, my 1 day a week, where I get political and rant and swear like the sailor I once was. So, have a seat, grab a drink, get comfortable, because we got some chit-chatting and some bitching to do tonight. But we're starting off differently. So, all right, my witchlings. This is going to be interesting because we need to talk about something I genuinely did not expect to ever be saying out loud here. I am actually about to give credit, and I do mean actual, real, earned credit to the current administration. Go ahead and hit that, yeah. So I can't believe I'm actually saying this. So just take a breath and let this set for a second. I am actually going to praise the current administration for 2 seconds. Because, if you've been here for more than 5 minutes, you know me, you already know I do not praise this administration lightly, if ever. But the Richard Starr Act. Now, witchlings, this is something I can stand behind. So, let's break this down for just a second, because if you are not a veteran or closely connected to one, this is an issue that you are probably clueless about, and that's okay. So, right now, as it stands, if a service member completes their 20 years and retires, at that point, they can receive both their military retirement and their VA disability compensation. Cool. Great. That tracks. That's how it should work, right? Right. But here's the rub. If someone is medically retired before hitting that 20-year mark, meaning, their body has literally been worn down, injured, or broken in service, their retirement pay gets reduced dollar for dollar by whatever amount they receive from the VA. Now, I was not medically retired. I was medically discharged, sort of. I'm in a gray area. But let me say this again, because it is super important. Your body gets broken serving your country, and if it has not been 20 years of active duty service, your compensation gets cut because of it. Please make that one make sense. You can't, because it doesn't. It never has. It's one of those quietly fucked up policies that only really hits your awareness if you're living it or standing next to someone who is. Everybody else, they just assume the system is taking care of its people like promised. But it's not. Or at least it hasn't been. And that is exactly what the Richard Starr Act is trying to fix. It is pushing to make sure that medically retired veterans receive both, just like those who made it to 20 years. Which, let's be honest, is not some extravagant task, honestly. That is just baseline fairness. That is recognizing that injury doesn't erase your service. That being forced out early doesn't make someone less deserving. And yeah, I'll be honest, I'm still a little shocked that I'm saying this. Because this policy, this is what it looks like when policy actually aligns with care. Not optics, not empty support the troops rhetoric that we hear constantly. Not the kind of performative patriotism that shows up for a photo op and then disappears when the budget gets discussed. This right here is actual, tangible, structural, and stuff that really, really could materially improve people's lives. And here's the part that matters just as much as the policy itself. I can be critical as hell of an administration. Hell, anybody who has watched this show for more than an episode or two knows I am highly critical of this administration. But I will still acknowledge when they get something right. I will give due credit. That is not me switching sides. That is me staying firmly grounded in reality. Shitty people do good things occasionally. Hell, even Mustache Man liked animals and children. But if you get so locked into outrage that you refuse to recognize progress, you're not being aware. You're at that point being reactive. And that's not how we create change. Real awareness means you can hold both. You can call out the harm while still recognizing the good. You can stay sharp without becoming so freaking rigid that you miss movement in the right direction. So yeah, credit where it's due right now. But do not get this twisted, because we ain't done there. Because support and momentum, hell yeah, that's step one. Follow through is what actually matters, though. So we keep watching, we keep pushing, and we sure as hell keep holding them accountable until this thing is not just a talked about thing, but passed, implemented, and actually doing what it's meant to. This particular act has come up in front of Congress multiple times. The only reason it's hitting the news right now is Keg's breath is throwing his weight behind it. I cannot believe I am actually supportive and in agreement with Keg's breath. Go figure. But veterans, hi. Especially the ones whose body paid that price before they could hit that 20-year mark, deserve far more than acknowledgement. They deserve equity. And now, my lovelies, I'm going to take a sip. Coffee went bad again. So, I'm going to take a sip. All right, now we are going to shift gears dramatically, but this one is messy, but in a completely different way. So we're going to talk GLP-1 drugs like Ozempic and Wegovy. Weight loss drugs. We're all familiar with Ozempic face right now. They have they have had an interesting effect on things like bariatric surgery. They're wrecking the demand for bariatric surgery. On the surface, this is something to celebrate. Fewer surgeries, less invasive options, more access. Yay! And yeah, there is something genuinely good in all of that. But before we go any further, I have to let you guys know, full disclosure, full honesty, because y'all know me. I am using Ozempic right now. I am not using it for aesthetics. Definitely not because I hate my body. I rather love my body. Not because I'm chasing some bullshit before and after fantasy. No. I am perfectly content being a bigger plus-sized witch. Hell, I worked at Torrid for 4 years and loved it. This body has never been the problem. My knees, my back, my fibro, my asthma, my arthritis, the chronic pain, those are the problem here. And when you stack all of that on top of a very serious family history of type 2 diabetes, where I am, to my knowledge, the only woman over 40 who has not been diagnosed yet, yeah, this stops about being appearance real fucking fast. This becomes about function, longevity, and quality of life. I have 6 grandchildren I would like to be able to watch grow up. Thank you very much. So, if you're sitting there thinking that I am using this for vanity's sake, you can fuck right off with that thought right now. Because this is what genuine autonomy looks like. My body, my choice. I am making choices for my body based on my actual needs, not somebody else's expectations. Full fucking stop. And that's exactly why this conversation matters so much. Because 2 things can be true at the same time. These medications can be genuinely helpful, life-changing even, and the system surrounding them can still be deeply fucked up. Because, they are. Now, right now, what we're watching isn't the system letting go of control over bodies. No. We are watching it adapt in real time. Bariatric surgery has always been extreme, permanent, a last resort option in a system that has spent decades pathologizing larger bodies. And now we've got medications that alter hunger signals, slow digestion, change how the body processes food, all without surgery. So of course people are going to choose that. But let's not pretend for one mini microsecond that the goal has changed, because it truly has not. The goal is still smaller bodies, more acceptable bodies, bodies that fit within a very specific, very narrow-ass definition of what is considered healthy, attractive, or worthy of care. And honestly, if we're not paying attention, it is so easy to slide into that narrative without even realizing it. And that is the part I want to push back on. Not the medication, not the people using it, most definitely not the people using it. I am pushing back on the narrative. Because if this were all purely about health, we would be having very different conversations here. We would be talking access to care, chronic pain management, preventative medicine, food systems, food deserts, stress, trauma, all of it. But instead, we're still here obsessing over weight. Still centering people's appearance, still framing smaller bodies as the default goal. And now, instead of surgery, we've got a pharmaceutical pipeline feeding that same expectation. Different method, same pressure. So, let's be real for a second. These medications are not being pushed by altruism. No. They are being pushed because they're profitable. Long-term use, repeat prescriptions, ongoing dependency. That is a business model. Again, does that make the medication itself bad? No, but it does mean we need to stay awake to the system we're operating inside of. Because I can take this medication to support my body, to reduce pain, to support my health, and prevent disease without buying into the whole idea that my worth is tied to my size. Now, in all honesty, I have been a bigger girl since puberty smacked my ass upside the head at 13. But my worth being tied to my size, no. These are very, very different things, caring for my health and my worth. And if you do not separate those things, that is where harm sneaks in, and that's where people, unfortunately, start chasing outcomes that were never actually theirs to begin with. So yeah, bariatric surgery rates are dropping, and for some people that's going to be a huge positive. But if we don't question the why behind that shift, if we don't look at the cultural and economic forces driving it, then all we've done is swap one version of control for another. And I don't know about y'all, but I am seriously not interested in trading one cage for a prettier one. Not interested in a gilded cage. All right, y'all. Now, we're going to walk into the fire. This is where we're going to start witching and bitching. Because this week, our Sanskrit word of the week is Ahimsa, non-harming. We're working through the yamas this week. People love to water Ahimsa down into something soft and convenient. You know, be nice, stay peaceful, don't make waves, just focus on your own energy. No. That is not Ahimsa. That, my friends, is avoidance dressed up as spirituality. Ahimsa is not passive, it is not silence, and it is sure as the hell not watching harm unfold and choosing comfort over action. Because, my friends, if harm is happening, and you have the ability to intervene, to speak, disrupt, or protect, doing nothing at that point is a choice. And it's not a neutral one. It's participation. No, we're good. All right. Now, this is the part people don't like to sit with because it is seriously uncomfortable as all hell. It asks something of you. It costs something. It requires you to risk being seen, being wrong, and being challenged. That's what ethics do. They don't just sit pretty on a shelf for you. They move through your life. They show up in your choices and They show up in your voice. And that, my witchlings, is where witchcraft comes in. Because, well, witchcraft has never been about compliance. It has always lived at the edges, with the people who were pushed out, talked over, erased, or even controlled. Witchcraft has always been practiced by the ones who just didn't fit neatly into the systems around them. The ones who asked questions they weren't supposed to ask, and the ones who saw harm and refused, utterly refused to normalize it. It's the lineage of the herbalist who treated people the system ignored, the midwife who protected life outside of institutional control, the cunning folk who worked in the gray spaces between what was allowed and what was necessary. That is resistance and activism. And no, you do not get to separate that from your practice just because it makes things messy. Because it is messy. It's complicated. It's uncomfortable. And it doesn't exactly fit into nice little aesthetic boxes with candles and crystals and pretty altar shots. It shows up in real life, in conversations where you have to say, no, that is not okay. In those moments where you have to decide whether you're going to stay quiet or speak up. In the way you spend your money, the way you use your platform, the way you show up for people who don't have the same level of safety or privilege that you do. And let's be real, it is one hell of a lot easier to keep your practice contained to your altar. It is. It's easier to light a candle than to call out harm. It is so much easier to just pull some tarot cards than to confront injustice. It is so much easier to say love and light than to actually stand in the discomfort of doing something. But ease has never been the measure of integrity. Ahimsa asks more than that. It asks you to look at harm clearly and honestly and then decide what your role is in that moment. Are you going to protect? Are you going to speak? Are you going to support? Or are you just going to stay comfortable and mind your own business? Because comfort and ethics do not always live in the same space. And if your version of non-harming only applies when it's easy, quiet, and when it doesn't cost you anything, honey, that is not Ahimsa. That is flat-out self-preservation. Which, don't get me wrong, has its place. You're allowed to have limits. You're allowed to not burn yourself out trying to fix everything. But that's not the same as opting out entirely. Because here's the truth. You do not get to claim a path rooted in awareness, energy, intention, and connection, and then ignore what's happening in the world around you. You don't get to call yourself a witch and then pretend your practice exists in a vacuum. Because it doesn't. It never has. Witchcraft is inherently relational. It's about your relationship. It's about your relationship to yourself, your community, the land, and to the systems you live within. And if those systems are causing harm, your practice doesn't get to sit that one out. So, no. You do not get to separate witchcraft from activism. You just do not. Because the moment you step onto this path, you're stepping into awareness. And awareness, like great power, comes with responsibility. Not perfection, not burnout, and sure as hell not trying to do everything all at once, but something. Something that says, I see what's happening, and I'm not going to pretend I don't. Something that says, this is my space, and harm doesn't go unchallenged here. That, my friends, is Ahimsa. It's not soft or passive, but deeply, unapologetically alive. See where we're going? So, as I was getting ready for either Daily Draw today or podcast, I was watching a video from Activist Witch. Her name is Isha. Her screen name, her YouTube name is Activist Witch. And they were talking about white women and performative activism. By the way, her pronouns are she, they. I did not fuck up. All right. So Isha was talking about white women and performative activism. And I want to take that a step further because there is a pattern here that a lot of people don't want to look at too closely. I mean, you've probably heard the phrase, I'm one of the good ones, right? Or at least some version of it. You're a good egg. You're one of the good ones. You're not like everybody else. And if that feels kind of familiar, it should. Because it runs on the exact same energy as not all men. Same structure, same deflection, but instead of engaging with the actual issue, it centers your identity. It turns the conversation into, but I'm not like that, but that's not me, but I'm doing my best. And okay, maybe that's true, but it's not the damn point. Because the moment the focus shifts to proving you're one of the good ones, you've already stepped away from the work. You're no longer asking, how do I show up better? You're asking, how do I make sure people know I'm one of the good ones? And those are two very different questions, my friends. One leads to growth, and the other leads to performance. And performative activism, oh my good gods, you guys, it is everywhere. It's the repost without action, the aesthetic without accountability. How many people do we know that changed their profile pictures on Facebook to a Ukrainian flag when that started? And how many of them are still in place? It's the outrage that conveniently disappears when it stops being visible. Didn't I just say something like that? And sometimes it is a whole lot uglier than that. So, here's an example I can think of off the top of my head. Let's talk about the angel tree posts around Christmas last year. You know the ones. The influencers filming themselves grabbing gifts, talking about how they're going to spoil this kid, making this whole emotional, heartwarming moment for content. And then walking away, abandoning the cart, and not buying a God's be damned thing. Simply using someone else's need as a prop for engagement. That's not generosity, my friends. That's exploitation. And it's easy to say, well, I could never do that. Cool, great, fine. But let's not pretend the same impulse doesn't show up in quieter ways, because it does. Here's the example Isha was talking about in her video. She was watching a video of a white woman speaking out on Palestine, a white witch, by the way, speaking out on Palestine, crying about how she's a highly sensitive person, how she can't even watch the news coverage because she just cries so hard when she watches it, and it's just so hard for her. And then, instead of directing people toward actual aid, actual resources, actual support for the people in the midst of all of this shit, she pivots into selling her own workbook to help others get through the stress of seeing all of this. So now, the focus isn't on the people experiencing harm anymore. It's now on her emotional experience of witnessing it. That is not solidarity. That is monetizing your God's be damned feelings. That is performative grief wrapped in a sales funnel. And again, I'm not saying this from a place of perfection. Gods know I am not perfect. And I'm going to be real with you here. I wrestle with this one a lot because my personal activism doesn't look like being out on the front lines protesting. It doesn't look like marching for hours or putting my body in physically risky situations because honestly my body most of the time won't let me. Between the chronic pain, the disabilities, and the neurospice, unfortunately that's not where I can show up. So yeah, there are a lot of times where I sit back and think, is what I'm doing even helping at all? Am I just making noise? Or worse, am I coming off as just performative? Because I know my heart, I'm trying to do something real. And right now that is a valid question to ask. But here is where I've had to get really, really, really honest with myself. Because there's a difference between performative activism and accessible activism. Performative activism is about being seen. You know, the influencer who buys a meal for a homeless person and then, make sure that they record themselves giving the meal to that homeless person, or a gift card. Accessible activism is what I'm doing, because it's about doing what you can where you are with what you have. I don't care if people see me doing what I can do. I'm just doing what I can because it's my nature to help. Performative activism centers the self. It centers you. Accessible activism centers impact, even if that impact is quieter, slower, and a whole lot less visible. Because honestly, not everyone can be on the front lines. And honestly, this is something that kills me, because we need to stop acting like that's the only form of activism that counts. Movements don't just run on protests. They run on education, amplification, fundraising, community care, and on people having conversations that shift perspectives. They run on people who are willing to use their voice, their platform, their skills, whatever those happen to be. So no, your activism isn't invalid just because it's digital. And it's not automatically performative just because it's visible. The question isn't where you're showing up, it is how. Are you centering yourself? Or are you centering the issue? Are you creating awareness that leads somewhere? Or are you stopping at just being seen caring? Are you willing to keep showing up when it's no longer trending, no longer easy, and no longer comfortable? Because that's the line. That's where performance ends and practice begins. So yeah, call out the bullshit. Call out the influencer who treats charity like content. Call out the grief that gets monetized instead of mobilized. But also, don't let that fear of, is what I'm doing being performative, stop you from showing up at all. Because honestly, silence doesn't solve that problem. It just removes you from the conversation entirely. And right now, we don't need less voices. We need more people willing to show up honestly. Okay? Okay. Now, let's bring this back to Ahimsa after I take a sip. Non-harming is not just about what you don't do. It's not just about avoiding harm in your own actions, keeping your side of the street clean, staying in your lane, and calling it good. No, it is about what you actively choose to stand against. Because harm doesn't just disappear because you personally didn't cause it. If someone is being harmed, Ahimsa asks a much harder question. What are you going to do about it? Not in some abstract philosophical way. Not in a hold a nice thought and send good vibes thought kind of way. Hello, we've had enough thoughts and prayers, thank you very much. But in a real, grounded, lived way. Are you going to speak up? Are you going to intervene? Are you going to support? Are you going to amplify the voices that are currently being ignored? Are you going to challenge the conversations that normalize harm? Are you going to put your time, your energy, and your resources behind something that actually creates change? Or are you going to stay silent because it's easier, because it doesn't impact you directly, because it's uncomfortable, or because it might cost you something socially, emotionally, or financially? Because, come on, let's not pretend that's not part of this. Ethics have a cost. Sometimes it's small, sometimes it's inconvenient, and sometimes it's big enough that you feel it in your bones before you ever open your mouth. That's why so many people default to silence, because silence feels safe. Silence lets you avoid conflict. It lets you avoid being questioned, challenged, or pushed. It lets you maintain your comfort, your image, your sense of control. But silence, my friends, is not neutral. It never has been. Silence protects the status quo. Silence allows harm to continue uninterrupted. Silence creates space where harmful systems don't have to defend themselves because nobody is actually challenging them. And that's where Ahimsa stops being soft and starts being sharp. Because non-harming doesn't mean avoiding discomfort. It doesn't mean staying peaceful at all costs. It definitely does not mean prioritizing your own sense of calm over someone else's safety. It means being willing to disrupt harm even when that disruption isn't pretty. Even when it doesn't come with a script, and even when you don't say it perfectly, your voice shakes a little or a lot. And here's the nuance, because this part matters. Ahimsa is not asking you to burn yourself out trying to fix everything. You are not required to fight every battle, every moment, every day. You are definitely allowed to have limits. You are allowed to rest, and you are allowed to choose where your energy goes. But choosing your battles wisely is not the same as avoiding them entirely. Because if your version of non-harming only exists when it's easy, when it's quiet, and when it doesn't require anything from you, honey, that is not Ahimsa, that is self-protection. And again, yes, self-protection has its place. We all need it. But it cannot be the only thing guiding your choices, because Ahimsa lives in that space where awareness beats responsibility, where you see what's happening, and instead of turning away, you ask, what is mine to do here? Not everything, but something. Maybe it's a conversation. Maybe it's sharing resources. Maybe it's supporting someone directly. Or maybe it's just refusing to participate in something that causes harm, or simply saying, no, that is not okay in a room where everyone else is pretending it is. That counts, and that matters, because ethics are not theoretical. They are lived. They show up in those small, everyday decisions just as much as the big, visible ones. They show up in what you tolerate, in what you challenge, and in what you choose to ignore and what you refuse to. Case in point, for the men out there, you've got a guy standing next to you and he says something really sexist. Ahimsa is looking at him and saying, dude, not okay. You're at a party or a family barbecue and somebody drops the N-word and you're white as Casper. Ahimsa is looking at that person and saying, that's not okay. That's not cool. So no, Ahimsa is not comfortable. It is not meant to be. It's not a passive state of being where you float above conflict and call it enlightenment. It is an active, engaged, deeply human practice. One that asks you to stay present, aware, and willing. And most importantly, to act. Because non-harming isn't just about keeping your hands clean. It's about making sure harm doesn't get to continue unchecked in the spaces you move through. And that, my witchlings, that takes courage. So, let's just say this plainly. If your witchcraft doesn't extend beyond your altar, you're missing the point. If your practice lives in candles, crystals, and beautifully curated spaces, or rituals that never leave the room, but none of it translates into how you actually move through the world, that's not transformation, my friends. That's escapism. And listen, I'm not saying your altar work doesn't matter, because it does. Ritual grounds you, it centers you, and it gives you a place to reconnect, to listen, and to realign. But honey, child, it's supposed to go somewhere after that. It is supposed to change how you show up. Because if you can sit in sacred space, set intentions, call in awareness, and claim alignment, and then step out into the world and ignore harm, injustice, and the ways people around you are being impacted, then what the fuck are you actually doing? What the hell is your practice for? And I get it. Trust me, I get it. The world is overwhelming as fuck right now. It is messy, it is exhausting, and it is loud, chaotic, and constantly demanding your attention, especially if you have one of these. Damn thing never stops making noise. There is always something happening. Always something pulling at your awareness, your energy, and your emotional bandwidth. So yeah, it makes perfect sense that people want to retreat into something that feels controlled and peaceful and separate from all of that shit. But opting out entirely? Dude, that's a privilege. And not everyone gets to do that. Some people are the ones actually being impacted. Some people don't have the option to turn it off, to scroll past it, or to close the door and pretend it's not happening. So when we choose to disengage entirely, when we say, not my circus, not my monkeys, that's not my lane, or I just want to focus on my own energy, we're making a choice. And again, not a neutral one. So let me be abundantly clear, because this is important. You don't have to do everything. You are not required to carry the entire weight of the entire world on your shoulders, and you are sure as hell not required to burn yourself out trying to fix systems that were never designed for one person to dismantle. No, that is not sustainable, and it surely is not healthy, and that's not what this is asking of you. But you do have to do something. Baby steps. Activism doesn't have to be loud to be real. It doesn't have to look like protests or megaphones or being on the front lines every single day. It can be quieter than that, more integrated, more consistent. Hell, someone I know in the Seattle area was running comms for CHOP during the BLM protests. Nowhere near the city of Seattle, but they were running comms because they could. It can look like how you spend your money, what businesses you support, and what systems you choose not to fund. I am personally still boycotting Target for their DEI shit. I am still boycotting Walmart because, well, Walmart treats their employees like shit. It can look like who you uplift, whose voices you amplify, whose work you share, whose experiences you choose to listen to and learn from. As a white woman, I myself have made the choice to follow more people of color content creators online, and more marginalized voices like that, to get myself out of my strictly white echo chamber. It can look like what you challenge, the conversations that you refuse to let slide, the comments you don't laugh off, and those moments where you look at someone and say, no, that is not okay here, even when it would be so much easier to stay quiet. Refer back to my comments on, being at the barbecue and somebody drops the N-word, or somebody says something super sexist or homophobic in front of you. Call that shit out. It can look like what you refuse to stay silent about, those issues that matter to you, the harm you're willing to name, the spaces where you decide your voice does belong. That counts. It matters, because activism is not a performance, it's a practice. It is something you live, not something you visit when it's convenient or visible or trending. Activism is more than a hashtag. And when you approach it that way, as something woven into your daily choices, your relationships, and your presence in the world, all of a sudden it stops being overwhelming. It becomes intentional, sustainable, and simply part of how you exist. And that, my friends, is where it circles right on back, because that, my darling witchlings, is witchcraft. Not just the ritual, not just the intention, the integration. The way you carry what you've cultivated in sacred space out into the world and let it shape how you act, how you speak, and how you engage. That's Ahimsa. Not passive or detached, but active, relational, and lived. That is sacred relationship in action. How are you going to call yourself a witch if you don't go out there and act like one? So, what's up? Checking in with the man behind the curtain. Okay. Checking in with the chat real quick, like. Hey, hey. Oh, hi, Irish. Oh, Lord. Irish. Hey, I see a Hazel. Oof. I love my mods. Y'all are the best. When did I start losing my mind? That implies I had one to start with. I know. I know. All right, let's see. Oh, I know. Let's see. Yeah, it's kind of a unicorn cup. It's a Starbucks cup. It's yoga with dyed pink, so it was a gift. Basically, as I said, you cannot call yourself a witch and not act like one. I fully understand being in the broom closet. I know a lot of people who are still in the broom closet, but you know, being a witch isn't a passive thing. And part of being a witch is standing up for those who don't have a voice. And it's something I'm pretty passionate about. Despite her many, many, many flaws, my incubator was very big on standing up for the underdog. I don't understand why, but we're not going to go there. And so this was hammered into me at a young age. You help your community. You participate in your community. And yeah. That is true. We do often get a lot of trolls in here because of the topic of this particular podcast. I see that. Oh, responding to the man behind the curtain. Normally we have a lot more people pop in and being exceedingly rude. So, yeah. All right. Doom. But I just watching Isha's video this afternoon really kicked me in the ass. And trust me, we will talk more about this topic because it's important. And that's what I keep coming back to. Just a whole, it's, you're good, Mimi. No worries. I have always been one to take up for the underdog. And then when my religious path moved from the church to the pagan path, I became the underdog. And then a couple of years later, realizing that I'm not 100% straight, and then finding out about my neurodivergence. I mean, I just keep getting knocked further and further and further down the line, and I can't not. I just and then starting my yoga studies, learning about Ahimsa. One of my favorite things about Ahimsa, learning about it. Everybody takes it as non-harming. You do no harm none. You know, it kind of goes hand in hand with the Wiccan read of harm none. And people will say, well, that includes the animals and yourself. Okay, so that is one of the reasons many yoginis or yogis are vegetarian or vegan, because of ahimsa, harm none. The problem is, when your body requires meat to get some of the nutrients it needs to survive, right? So that brings up an ahimsa dilemma. You either have to harm an animal to survive, or you harm yourself to not harm animals. Well, in that case, your body's needs kind of take priority. And that was when it was really hammered home to me, was having that discussion. Ahimsa includes not harming yourself. Really. Exactly, we're omnivores. But I just, I don't entirely get it. And then also, as a disabled woman, and a veteran, a conversation I had with a fellow veteran, yes, I did. He's a Vietnam vet. And he was talking with a mutual friend of ours about how he kind of resents the fact that he can't be what we call boots on the ground and on the front lines with the protests and everything that's going on. And I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. I have to remind myself of this. You're a military man, just like I am. And we both know that military ops require not just the boots on the ground, but the intel, the supply corps, the communications team, and everything else. So you're going to keep screaming from the rooftops what you know, and you're going to keep disseminating the information, and you're going to let those who are capable of being boots on the ground be boots on the ground. Just because you're not out there fighting the good fight face to face, hand to hand, doesn't mean you're not fighting anymore. And I have to remind myself of that because of my own disabilities, as I said during that segment. And it's hard. It's really hard sometimes. But hey, there's a reason the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, and the Space Force all have more ratings than just, combat. What's up, my love? I'm being reminded to sit up straight so I don't pinch the nerve in my shoulder worse. All right, you guys. We're going to wrap up here. Quick little reminder. This space exists solely because of my Witchling community. There are no corporate sponsors here, just shared magic, mutual care, and a whole lot of love. So please, if you're enjoying what you're seeing here, do the like, share, subscribe thing. Join the channel if you have the financial means to do so and you feel like you would enjoy it. And most of all, help us grow our Witchling community by sharing this video and this channel with a friend. And now, Witchlings, it is time to go out there and spread love, spread joy, and spread kindness, because this world is full of hateness and darkness and discontent, and we can definitely use more people being beacons of light and love and hope for those stumbling in that darkness. Make sure your loved ones in all their forms, 2 legs, 4 legs, wings, fur, scales, paws, claws, know that you love them beyond words. Because time is not a strict progression of cause to effect. It is far, far more of a big ball of wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey stuff that moves so much faster than any of us want to acknowledge, meaning those chances to say I love you one last time are not ever, ever guaranteed. And if you take one thing and one thing only away from everything I do here every day, every week, I hope it's that you always remember this. You are loved. You are wanted. You are needed, and you do have a reason for being here, even if you haven't figured out what it is yet. I didn't figure mine out until I was 45. I love you guys to bits. Have a fantabulously magical rest of your day or night, wherever you are. Namaste, my witchlings. Now, go raise a little bit of hell ethically. Make some good trouble.